Welcome. In today's demo, Daniel's going to show you how to build a CI/CD pipeline using Gitlab CI and Argo CD. Using Anthos Config Management, we'll bootstrap the infrastructure components and start using a GitOps approach for our applications and infrastructure.
In this video, I'll be going over creating a CI/CD pipeline with Gitlab CI and Argo CD. The underlying Kubernetes platform I'm going to be using in this video is Anthos on GCP. We're also going to be using Anthos Config Management to bootstrap our cluster to install infrastructure components such as Argo CD and Istio. So we have a developer who is going to be doing his normal day-to-day, creating features, bug fixes, and collaborating with their teammates. Once all the code is in place, our developer creates a merge request against the source repository. In my case, I'm using GitLab for my source code repository, but you can also use GitHub. So when the merge request is created, it's going to trigger a pipeline job. The pipeline job starts off with code coverage. It could start off with a Docker build. It could start off with unit testing, and it could be customized to your liking. In my case, I start off with code coverage with code climate. I do a Docker build with Canico, and I do a security scan with Aqua. And finally, I push my Docker image to GCR. You could also replace it with ACR, Harbor, whatever. So when these pipeline jobs finish and are green, I'm going to go ahead and merge my merge request against the dev branch. Once the dev branch has the code merged, it's going to trigger a deploy pipeline. That deploy pipeline is going to stage the image ID in my environment repository, which in turn is going to trigger a webhook to Argo CD. And Argo CD is going to deploy my application, the dev namespace in my Kubernetes cluster, and my prod namespace in my Kubernetes cluster. This environment repository contains all the YAML manifests, the Kubernetes manifests to store the state of my application. And the installation of Argo CD, Istio for ingress, dev and prod namespaces is going to be done with Anthos Config Management. And what that looks like is by the following diagram. Now let's get into the demo. This is my source repository, and it contains my application, my Docker file, and it's just a Spring Boot application called Spring Store. First, I'm going to show you the pods for config management to show you that it's an Anthos-enabled cluster, and then my pods for Argo CD. And the installation of Argo CD is done by Anthos Config Management, which is in the namespace folder here under Argo CD. And I have an Argo application for Spring Store Dev, which is in the UI here, and it's synced. And this is what my application looks like. It's called Spring Store. You can buy items, which adds them to the queue. And here are the pods for my application, which consists of a front end, back end, and a queue pod. And these are the pods for my Spring Store prod namespace, which don't exist yet. So let's add another Argo application for Spring Store prod. So I'm going to cheat and copy the code. And you can see it points to the repository in the YAML manifest, and it points to the kube/prod folder. For my dev application, it points to the dev folder. So all the YAML manifests that exist in this folder will be automatically applied onto that namespace. And I'm going to go ahead and commit changes. And let's go wait for the application to come up. And you can see my pods are up. And on the Argo UI, you can see that the sync has started. And I can get the virtual service of my application, which points to this URL. And let's open this URL. And it should be the same as dev. The background of the application is pretty simple. It's all white. So let's make a code change. Let's change the name of the store to Arctic Store. And let's add a background to this too, to follow the Arctic theme. So I'm going to add my code to change the name of the store and add a background image. And I'm going to commit that change. Okay, so now that my code is in, I'm also going to create another branch and make another change in the Docker file. What this simulates is essentially two developers working together on one feature and creating a pull request or a merge request in this case. And we should be able to see that no pipeline was triggered or no pipeline jobs were seen. And now let's go ahead and go from the feature branch that I have into the dev branch. And what this simulates is the dev branch is going to be the dev environment. The master branch is going to be the prod environment. So we're going to create a merge request and submit that. And now you can see that a pipeline automatically triggered. Let's click on the pipeline and you can see that we have code quality, build image, aqua scan, and add image ID as stages in the pipeline. Let's click on code quality and take a look at what's going on. And while that's going on, we can take a look at the actual YAML file for the pipeline. Pipeline is configured in an external repository, which is called Spring Store Pipeline. And it's essentially a YAML file comprising of all the stages of my pipeline. This covers the CI and the CD piece of the pipeline. Now going back to the job that's running for code quality, we can see that it's almost complete. When it is done, we can see that it generated an artifact. And we can quickly browse to that artifact. And it'll show us an HTML file comprising of our code quality scan. And you can see I have some cognitive complexity here. We're going to ignore that for now. I'm going to go back and we're going to take a look at the next job, which is going to be the build image. Here I'm using Canico to build the image and push to GCR. Once that is done, the image is pushed. And the next stage is going to be the security scan for the Docker image, which I'm using the Aqua microscanner here, which generates a nice report. And it shows the image is not compliant. We're going to ignore that as well right now. Drill down onto the CVE and go to the vendor page and look at the severity of this vulnerability. And now we can take a look at the last stage, which hosts the image ID in my environment repository. So what my environment repository looks like is a bunch of templates which are variabilized, such as the Google Project ID, the image ID here, and these are all added during the deployment phase of my pipeline. And these variables are added in the variable store in GitLab CI. So you can see these are scoped by environment. So the dev environment will have the dev variable and the prod environment will have the prod variables. And we're now using the QA environment. So we're going to skip that. And this is the image ID that gets hosted, which you can see got authored 1 minute ago. And this will be substituted in the template by environment variables. And this matches the same commit ID, which you can see in the source code repository. So this is done. We're going to go ahead and merge, which essentially is a signal to deploy in the dev environment because we're merging into the dev branch. And you can see a pipeline just got triggered, which is going to be my deploy pipeline. And we can see the deploy dev pipeline is running and now it's complete. And immediately we can see in Argo CD that a synchronization just got triggered. That is because webhooks are configured on the environment repository to issue webhooks whenever there's a commit to the environment repository. So we can come back to the application, we can quickly refresh and we can see the Arctic store and the mount in the background, and we can see that the application functions the same way as it did before. At this point, we can see the prod application that is on the older version, and we can see the dev, which is on the newer version. And now we want to simulate the change from dev all the way to prod, and we want to make sure it's the same image that's being carried out from dev to prod. So we're going to create a new merge request, which is going to say dev to prod. And let's submit that merge request. And we can see the deploy to dev happened 2 minutes ago. If the deployment for dev had failed, we won't be able to merge into master as well. And now we can merge to master, which would trigger another pipeline for deployment to prod. And we can take a look. And that's complete. And we can quickly take a look at the Argo application for Spring Store prod. And we can see it succeeded a few seconds ago. And the pods are coming up and the synchronization is complete. And let's take a look at the application and the pods. And we can see they were 34 seconds ago. And let's refresh the application. And we can see that it looks the same way as dev now, simulating the change from all the way from dev to prod. And now at this point, we can always add additional stages as well, things like QA, staging, test can be. And by going with this workflow, we can ensure that developers don't need to worry about Kubernetes manifests. They just need to worry about the source code and do what they do best. Kubernetes is complex, but Anthos takes away much of the complexity with Anthos Config Management. On the application layer, much of the complexity is taken away by this GitOps approach using Gitlab CI and Argo CD. I hope you like this demo, and I will see you in the next one.
Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow the Arctic team for the latest updates, demos, and technical deep dives.